Here's Precalc. It's problem 4-45. It says approximate A, and then it's F. Well, it's for the interval between when x is between 1 and 2. For f of x equals negative x squared plus 6. So A, that's like the area. The area of this function in the interval between where x is in between 1 and 2. Okay, and then it says letter A, it says use 4 rectangles to approximate an underestimate of the area under the curve. So it might help if you knew what the curve looks like, and you can see that it looks like our parent function, the parabola, but it's a downward facing parabola, and it's lifted up by 6. So I drew a little picture of it. I mean, you don't have to draw the picture, but you need to know that it's a decreasing function on our interval between, if this is 1 and this is 2, you need to know it's a decreasing function. So you can see that my underestimates, like, so I have to use 4 rectangles, right? It told me in the directions to use 4 rectangles. So I have to chop this interval between 1 and 2 into 4 little rectangles. So like, I don't know if you can even see these little rectangles that I'm making, but I'm making it so that it's chopped into these 4 tiny little rectangles in between 1 and 2. So this first rectangle, the height of it would be, actually, it would be this end of the rectangle is touching, so the height would be that corner right there is 1.25. And then right here, this corner right here, the height is, well, not the height, sorry. The x value is 1.25. And this x value is 1.5, and the next one would be 1.75. I know they're really small. And then the last one would be 2, because it told me that I had to have 4 rectangles, right? And I'm in between 1 and 2. So the interval between 1 and 2 is just, you know, the difference, like 2 take away 1 is just 1. And I have to break it into 4 rectangles. So that means each rectangle has to be 0.25. So actually this height is not 1.25. It's going to be whatever I get when I plug 1.25 into my function. Okay, so I'll just do it this one time with my calculator, but really I already calculated all of them. But if I just went negative 1.25 squared plus 6, well, that's 4.4375. So this height is 4.4375. So if I want the area of this one little teensy weensy rectangle, it would be 0.25 across the bottom times 4.4375, because that gives me the height. But I don't want to do it that way. I don't want to keep multiplying each one by 0.25. I'm just going to multiply. I'm going to find out what all these heights are. So I just did it right here. I found out this height, the 3.75, that's this height. And then the next height was 2.9375. I'm getting those heights by plugging the x values in. Hey, maybe I should focus this. Plugging the x values in. Okay, and I'm using these rectangles. Like, I'm not using the 1, even though my interval is between 1 and 2, because I want the underestimate first, because that's what they asked me for letter A. So instead of going 0.25 times this height plus 0.25 times this height plus 0.25 times this height plus 0.25 times this height, I'm just going to go 0.25 times, I'm going to add all the heights up first. then multiply them by 0.25, and that's where this number comes from. And this is actually the area of those 4 shaded rectangles. And I know that those are way too small, and if you didn't really understand the concept, that it was too hard to see. So I'm going to do these ones. These are the overestimates, because letter B wants 4 rectangles to approximate an overestimate. I'll draw these ones a little nicer, a little more nicely for you. I'll use pencils in case I mess up. So the overestimate is going to be they're going to be like rectangles that stick out over the top of the curve. Okay, so hopefully I hope that makes sense. This thing is a curve. How did I know that it had a 5 here? And well, I know that the curve goes up to 6 because it's negative x squared plus 6. And so, but when I plug in 1 into negative x squared plus 6, I get negative 1 plus 6. That's where I'm getting my 5 from. Okay, so the height of this rectangle is 5, and the width is 0.25, because see this has got to be like 1.25, and this has got to be 1.5, and this has got to be 1.75, because there have to be 4 rectangles, and they have to fit in between 1 and 2. So that's pretty much the only way you can make it happen. So you'll notice that a lot of these heights of the rectangles, they're already on my table. All I really have to do is just use this same table that I made, and just instead of using these, I'm going to use these ones over here. So that's what I did here, is I went 0.25, and then these are all the heights of the rectangles. These are what the y values when I plug in my 1 and my 1.25 and my 1.5 and my 1.75. And you can try it. Go ahead and use your calculator and get them. Add them up, you get this sum. So that's the answer to letter B. And then the answer to letter C is probably the trickiest part. It wants you to use, it says express the sum of the underestimate using sigma notation. So I have to use this underestimate with sigma notation. So with the underestimate, shouldn't have crossed through it. The underestimate, my x values were these ones, 1.25, 1.5, 1.75, and 2. So what I started out with is the 0.25. Whatever I do when I add up, because basically all I'm doing is I'm trying to show that I'm adding up these 4 numbers. And then this 0.25 will just like after I'm done adding up these 1, 2, 3, 4 numbers, then we'll multiply it by 0.25. So that's why the 0.25 is out here. But how am I getting these numbers? That's what the sigma notation is all about. So I'm trying to, well, I noticed my numbers, they're not starting with 1. They're starting with 1.25. So I need to get like a y equals mx plus b that's, like a linear, something linear to put inside this function. And by the way, the function just came from here, negative x squared plus 6, because that's how I got these numbers, is I took the 1.25 and I plugged it in right there. So that's why I have the negative, and then I've got this thing squared plus 6. So the tricky part is, how did I get these 2 numbers, and how did I get this number inside? So I want to start out with, well, I want this thing to go up by 0.25 each time, like plus 0.25, plus 0.25, plus 0.25. So that means my slope's going to be 0.25. So I've got y equals 0.25x plus b, but I want the first term to be 1.25. So I just ask myself, like, Like, if I just let b equal 1, then when I take my first term, doesn't that give me what I want? That gives me 0.25 plus 1, right? And then the next term, the second term, 0.25 times 2 is 0.5, and 0.5 plus 1, well, that's 1.5. So that gives me my second term, so that tells me I'm on the right track. And then I would do, the next one you can imagine it would be 0.25 times 3, which would give me 0.75 plus 1. That'd give me this one. And then 0.25 times 4. So that tells me I'm going between 1 and 4. So that's why I wrote 1 and 4. And this little linear term inside here, that gives me what I'm plugging in to the function. So this is the answer to letter C.